I can kind of hold some of the weight on this. Ooh, easy breeze, bro. All right, so you clicked on this video because you got yourself an engine stand and you have no idea how to mount that engine properly on that engine stand. So on this video, I'm going to be showing you guys exactly what you have to do and what you need to be looking for in order to properly mount the engine on the engine stand safely and quickly. Let's go. All right, so you guys got your engine stand and it most likely looks something very similar like this. This is, I believe, a 2-ton jack stand from Harbor Freight. Got it on one of the sales they had. And this is my motor, the Honda Civic R18 4-cylinder Honda engine. And on a 4-cylinder, where you want to mount the engine is into some of the existing holes that are on the block here. And this is the transmission side. This is where you will be mounting the engine. From the get-go, I'm going to tell you that you're going to probably spend anywhere from $25 all the way to $50 on the dedicated bolts that you guys need in order to connect the engine properly and safely on the engine stand. It's definitely possible to use your transmission bolts and possibly use them in some of the connection points in the transmission. So for example, this engine has a threaded insert right here for the transmission, right over here for the transmission, right over here for the transmission, and those are the threaded portions. You also have a pass-through hole right over here and right over here that we can use, and there's 2 holes, one on the bottom, or 2 actually on the bottom right over here that we can use. So you kind of want to see your engine style and which holes are available. Again, most commonly you will be using the transmission bolt holes in the engine right here. So once you go to the auto parts store, which I suggest Ace or Home Depot, you will be greeted with a ton of bolts, a ton of lengths, metric, standard, and all those kinds of bolts, and you probably have no idea which ones you want. So let's go ahead and explain that. The best thing you can do is take that transmission bolt and thread it on. So now once you know this fitment is good, you can take this bolt and check the thread pitch. Ace Hardware or one of those tool stores, they can match up the correct pitch and thread of the bolt. Now you also want to keep in mind the bolt has to have a good strength on it, right? So the higher the number right over here you can get, the stronger the bolt is. I went with the 8.8 because that's all they had available, and from my research online that is more than enough, especially on a 4-cylinder. Thing is, once you know the correct thread, the question comes, how long should the bolt be? And this is what we're going to calculate right now. So what you want to do is you want to thread the bolt in all the way until it bottoms out, and once it bottoms out you want to mark exactly the depth of it. So right over here we're pretty much using the full length of the threads, and that's where it bottomed out. So we're going to take that as a measurement. So now we also have to factor in this mounting surface for the length of the bolt. So right over here, with this being maxed out, I'm still not seeing all the threads, but we're very, very close. So this is a good example of how long you want the bolt to be. If your bolt was shorter and was only able to go in this far out, so meaning only these threads would be in the engine, that is not enough threads. You definitely want to get a longer bolt in order to thread into that engine and just to have that security when you're lifting a 200, 300, 400 pound engine. Now if you get a bolt that's way too long, you're gonna have to add some washers or nuts here to space it out. So ideally what you want to get is a bolt that is pretty much close to perfect. So for example, this is one bolt that I believe is 100 millimeters long, and it's just about perfect. Now I also got some longer bolts. As you can see, these extend a little bit longer, but since they are a little bit too long, I'm using a nut as a spacer here. It's the perfect amount of thread. And also for my engine, for example, I will be using this pass-through hole as one of the mounting points, and what you're going to need is, at this point, the length of the bolt doesn't matter, but you're going to need some washers such as this on both ends, and a nut. So we're gonna be able to pass that bolt through here with that extension, and that shouldn't be a problem. These aren't as critical since they're pass-throughs, but again, the more critical ones are the threaded bolts, and you have to again consider is the depth of the threads that go in the block, and then you're gonna have to factor in how long your engine stand bracket is. So you take the length this plus the length of the threads, and that's how long your bolt should be. I'll tell you guys the specifications right now for all these bolts I got for this 2007 Honda Civic R18 engine, but it's very similar process for all makes and models and vehicles. The only thing you got to consider when you're tearing these motors apart, if you are going to be working on them, is to make sure where these mounting bolts are actually going. So the first two bolts are connected to the block. This bolt right over here that you would thread in for the engine to be on the engine stand is actually the girdle. This area right here is the main girdle, and the bottom two bolts are actually the oil pan. So depending where you take those 4 mounts to mount, you got to consider if you are going to be taking that motor apart. If I'm going to be taking the oil pan off this motor, I don't want to use the bottom 2 mounts. And you know, for this motor, for example, we're going to use the top 2. We're going to use this pass-through bolt, which is again part of the block, but we have to use this 4th hole, which is the girdle. But what's going to happen is once I tear this motor apart, you know, take the head off, take the oil pan off, a lot of the weight will be off the motor. So I feel comfortable taking my 4th bolt out of the main girdle and it holding on to these 3 bolts. I'm comfortable, and sometimes that's the only option you have, and you just gotta roll with it. So if you guys want some measurements, this one is 2 inches and 3/4. Threads here is about 1 inch and 3/8. So all in all, I think it cost me roughly about $35 for all the nuts and bolts that I ended up buying for the engine stand, which is pretty hefty for just some nuts and bolts. But hey, if you want to get into engine swaps and whatnot, engine rebuilding, this is a must. Small price to pay because you can reuse a lot of these, especially if you're working on the same series motors. Now again, different engines, you might have different threads, different pitches, so you'll have to keep reinvesting that $30 to $50 for the engine you are working on. So right now I am going to be mocking up the mounts on the engine, and the easiest thing to do is first mock up this piece to the engine. Then we're gonna wait for my buddy to come, and we're gonna lift the engine and put it on the engine stand, because obviously you can't hold the engine over here while you're mocking it up and bolting it down. So yes, this is removable, and I'm gonna show you guys right now. We're gonna knock it out. All right, the first thing I'm gonna do is just throw a little bit of PB Blaster on these threads here. All right, at this point, you're pretty much ready to mount everything back on the engine stand. So we got the bolts going into the block connected. We got the bolts for the adjustments connected. Everything is mounted solid. You know, I just did it hand tight, and I think that's plenty, more than enough. So once I get a buddy, we're gonna grab the motor, slide that shaft right in the engine here on the engine stand, and we'll be good to go. And then at that point you can start working on your JDM domestic imported engines and building some boost, baby. If you guys like this video, enjoyed that video, smash the like button, subscribe to the channel. If you are interested in watching the R18 turbo come to life, go ahead, definitely give me a follow. We already got a turbo R18 rocking over here. Great little motor, pretty slow, but still very fun for an entry-level person to do something like this themselves. Super easy motor to work on.
Put it there.
All the way. All right.
So,
Get that pin.
oh, buddy. That's right there, guys. Is how you put a R18 engine on a jack stand, and we do a full forged pistons and rods build, and we're gonna push 29 psi of boost through this baby, making about 400 wheel.
Damn, man, you were so accurate on half the things you just said. So we just gotta be careful on these cracks, but I want to roll it here. So I can kind of hold some of the weight on this. Oh, dude, easy breeze, bro. Drift it.
Drift it.
Drift it. Hold on. Actually. All right, ladies and gentlemen, the R18 is on the engine stand. First engine I've had on an engine stand.
It looks pretty cool.
Doesn't, and not too heavy. I actually thought it was gonna be a lot heavier than it was. Maybe like, I don't know, with both of us.
You think we could do my S63 motor next?
S63 is gonna be next, bro. We're gonna tear this down and see what it brings, man. But it's in pretty good shape. Like, look at the front end here. Like, it's pretty clean. But it's like original freaking get Honda bond, you know. And look at this. Look at this. Look at that oil. Full oil, and it's still pretty clean. Once I tear this apart, you know, put a stethoscope or boroscope down the
Does the crank spin?
It's spun. I just don't want to spin it more. I spun it when I first picked up the motor, and again, there's no spark plugs in there, so it's spun, but it's not seized or anything. Probably not even overheated, you know. I mean, doesn't look bad, doesn't smell bad. You know, hopefully we have some potential here.
Yeah. I like it. I like it a lot.
It looks freaking fantastic where it is at, and I can't wait to start working on it, tweaking it, and creating something y'all will be proud of.
I ain't here for the money, I ain't here for the fame. Though it might be nice to own a jet plane, I'ma do it all for you. Come along and see it's true, but the world is pretty cool.